This evening, I unveil my own truth amid the bitter cold of a Swiss winter. As lightning carved the heavens above Lake Geneva, a 19-year-old woman birthed a monster destined to haunt humanity's conscience across centuries. The being born from Mary Shelley's mind was no mere corpse reanimated by electrical currents. It stood as a profound inquiry into creation, awareness, and ethical obligation, one that would shatter existing notions of what it means to exist as human. Have you ever questioned why Frankenstein's creature persists while so many Gothic nightmares have faded into the forgotten shadows? Why this singular narrative of scientific overreach keeps evolving, mirroring each era's deepest fears regarding progress, selfhood, and the risks of usurping divine authority? Tonight, we delve into more than a tale of terror. We encounter a philosophical contagion that has woven itself into literature, cinema, and the very fabric of human thought, mutating across 200 years of retelling while retaining its core power to unsettle, illuminate, and reshape our grasp of creation's hidden price. Step into the workshop where literature converges with philosophy, where Gothic romance gives rise to science fiction, and where a young girl's nightmarish vision continues to mold our perceptions of the bond between maker and made, human and other, knowledge and discernment. I am Obsidian Vault, your navigator through the intellectual heart of humanity's most lasting modern myth. From Mary Shelley's groundbreaking original to contemporary reinterpretations wrestling with artificial intelligence, gene editing, and digital awareness, Frankenstein endures as our sharpest symbol for the unforeseen fallout of unrestrained ambition. From the romantic gatherings of 1816 Geneva to 21st century bioethics labs, from Victorian stage renditions to modern cinematic triumphs, the creature's footsteps resonate in every debate over scientific accountability, synthetic life, and the limits of human understanding. Yet this transcends mere literary history. Frankenstein's philosophical genetic code has infiltrated fields Mary Shelley could never have imagined. It shapes robotics, bioethics, psychology, and political theory with questions that grow increasingly pressing. Our technological might nears the godlike capabilities Victor Frankenstein wielded in fiction. Subscribe to accompany our journey through literature's most influential thought experiment, and leave a comment telling us which Frankenstein adaptation has most profoundly influenced your view of humanity's relationship with its own inventions. This evening, we dissect 5 pivotal moments in Frankenstein's literary transformation, each revealing how distinct eras have imposed their own fears and hopes onto Shelley's foundational work. These adaptations do more than repeat the tale. They unearth fresh philosophical dimensions that mirror humanity's changing bond with technology, nature, and ethical duty. From the original 1818 text, born of enlightenment, optimism, and romantic defiance, to modern works grappling with the unique anxieties of our digital age, consciousness, creation, and consequence, we will explore how each generation discovers new terrors and new wisdom within the story of the scientist who dared to animate life, and the being who demanded a place in the world that forged him. These narratives reflect our species' ongoing battle with the repercussions of our own inventiveness, the obligations tied to the ability to reshape nature, and the awful splendor of entities that dwell on the edges between human and alien, organic and synthetic, sacred and damned. Now, let us begin our expedition into the philosophical workshop where Mary Shelley's creativity continues to spawn new insights about creation, awareness, and the toll of knowledge that defies death's barriers. The birth of the modern Prometheus, Mary Shelley's philosophical upheaval, 1818. In the summer of 1816, when volcanic dust darkened the skies and produced a year without warmth, a group of literary outcasts gathered at Villa Diodati beside Lake Geneva for a ghost story contest that would forever transform humanity's understanding of its relationship with creation. Imagine, if you will, the intellectual climate of that extraordinary home. Lord Byron, the scandalous poet whose reputation for excess rivaled his genius. Percy Bysshe Shelley, the radical philosopher and poet who believed human nature could be refined through logic. John Polidori, the young doctor fascinated by the nascent sciences of electricity and animal magnetism. and 18-year-old Mary Godwin, daughter of two of England's most revolutionary thinkers, Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin. This wasn't simply a meeting of romantic poets. It was a clash of the era's most cutting-edge philosophical and scientific ideas. These people had fully understood the consequences of the French Revolution, observed the early phases of industrialization, and wrestled with breakthroughs in chemistry, anatomy, and natural philosophy that implied the essential forces of life could be comprehended, managed, and maybe even produced by human intellect. Dr. Ann Mellor from UCLA, whose pioneering research on Mary Shelley has transformed how we view the philosophical underpinnings of the novel, contends that Frankenstein arose from a singular merging of intellectual currents, never before blended in fiction. According to Mellor, Mary Shelley wrote right when the Enlightenment's faith in rational advancement clashed with the romantic perception of nature's dark power. Frankenstein is the first literary work that sincerely investigates the consequences of scientific materialism, trying to copy the original creative force of nature itself. The philosophical backdrop that spawned Frankenstein is impossible to grasp without delving into the intellectual upheaval that came before it. Luigi Galvani's tests on animal electricity revealed that electrical current could trigger muscle movement, implying that the line separating life from death might simply be an issue of correct stimulation. Erasmus Darwin, Charles's grandfather, had hypothesized about spontaneous generation occurring in controlled settings. The gap between living and non-living matter seemed more and more open to scientific exploration, but Mary Shelley's brilliance was not just in expanding on these scientific concepts. It was in seeing their deep philosophical meanings. If science could create life, what duties would the creator owe to the creation? If consciousness could emerge from properly arranged matter, what would separate natural beings from artificial ones? If human understanding could match divine creative ability, what ethical guidelines would govern such unprecedented powers? The book's alternate title, The Modern Prometheus, instantly placed Shelley's work within classical philosophical tradition, while signaling its bold break from earlier treatments of the creation myth. Prometheus, who stole divine fire for humanity, had historically been depicted either as a benefactor whose punishment was unfair, or as a wrongdoer who deserved divine punishment. But Shelley added an entirely new moral depth by showing that the repercussions of Prometheus's theft affect not only the thief, but innocent beings brought to life without their consent. Victor Frankenstein's persona stands as the first literary exploration of what we now understand to be the core ethical dilemmas surrounding scientific research. His quest for knowledge isn't driven by evil purposes, but by the highest ideals of enlightenment, thinking the wish to relieve human suffering, prolong life, and push the limits of human understanding. Yet his methods violate natural laws, and his neglect of duty toward his creation demonstrates how intellectual accomplishment without moral insight can produce horrors that outweigh any benefits it might bring. The monster himself embodies philosophical inquiries that literature had never examined with such depth before. Endowed with extraordinary physical abilities but no social environment, possessing sharp intelligence but no formal education, except what he learns by watching and reading, he becomes the ultimate test case for ideas about human nature, moral growth, and social duty. Philosophers from John Locke to Jean-Jacques Rousseau had argued over these issues for centuries. Historical writings from the Villa Diodati group, preserved in letters and diaries uncovered by scholars throughout the 1900s, expose the philosophical debates that directly shaped Frankenstein's creation. Percy Shelley's interest in materialism and atheism, Byron's skeptical views on human nature, and Mary's own study of her parents' radical political theories all fed into a work that blended multiple intellectual traditions into something wholly original. The novel's very narrative design mirrors a sophisticated philosophical understanding. By structuring the story as a tale told by Victor to Robert Walton, another ambitious explorer trying to surpass natural boundaries, Shelley created a mise en abîme that pushes readers to face their own connection to dangerous knowledge. Walton's choice to turn back from his Arctic journey after hearing Victor's story shows that wisdom can overcome ambition, but only once the results of uncontrolled desire have been completely exposed. Perhaps most strikingly, Mary Shelley foresaw philosophical issues that would not become pressing for another 200 years. The creature's request for a mate raises questions about artificial consciousness, social acceptance, and the rights of manufactured beings problems that today's bioethicists and AI researchers still struggle with. 他在正义、归属与复仇方面展开的雄辩论证，展现出强大的智力水平，直接动摇了维克多坚信自己创造的只是一个机械傀儡，而非一个理应获得道德考量的有意识生命的预设观念。1818年的出版文本问世时，玛丽才刚满20岁，其中蕴含的哲学思想，或许连她本人也未能彻底领悟。通过阅读《失乐园》、普鲁塔克名人传和少年维特的烦恼，这个造物汲取了基督教神学、古典美德伦理与浪漫主义情感主义相结合的道德框架。然而，面对自己作为人工创造的有意识生命这一独特处境，这些传统体系无一能给出合理解答。他渴望在一个从未为他的存在划定范畴的世界里寻得一席之地。牛津大学的玛丽莲·巴特勒博士对弗兰肯斯坦思想背景的分析已成为权威。他认为小说持久的影响力源于将科学唯物主义与道德哲学成功融为一体。巴特勒指出，之前的哥特小说依赖超自然力量来制造恐惧，而雪莱的创新在于揭示，纯粹的自然过程一旦被人类智慧所引导，便能营造出比任何超自然现象更令人毛骨悚然的局面，因为它迫使读者直面自身日益膨胀的技术能力所引发的真实后果。弗兰肯斯坦引发的哲学变革超越了文学领域，深刻影响了科学伦理、政治理论与心理学认知。通过设想一个被人工创造的有意识生命的视角，雪莱迫使读者审视关于人格、公民身份与道德责任的固有观念。此前这些观念被视为理所当然，造物的孤独及其后的暴力行为，引发了关于社会排斥与犯罪行为之间关系的追问。日后犯罪学家与社会学家将在实证研究中深入探讨这一议题。然而，小说最为深刻的哲学贡献或许在于他认识到创造与毁灭是一对无法分割的共生体。维克多试图通过科学手段消除死亡，最终却因造物的复仇而加剧了死亡对完美知识的追求，反而导致对知识应用后果的彻底无知。超越自然极限的渴望制造出了现有道德体系无法应对的非自然困境。这一悖论，人类最崇高的抱负可能催生最不人道的结果，成为后续改编作品根据各自历史语境不断探索、改造与延伸的核心主题。玛丽雪莱所创造的不仅是一个故事，更是一套哲学框架，能够容纳人类对自身创造力量日益增长的焦虑。1818年的弗兰肯斯坦确立了认知技术进步中道德复杂性的模板，质疑了伴随创造力量而来的责任，并设想了那些游走于人类与非人、自然与人工、神圣与凡俗边界之上的生命视角。在瑞士迷雾笼罩的山谷间，那位革命者的少女女儿孕育出了一个造物，它将萦绕此后每一次关于创造、意识以及胆敢挑战神权的知识代价的讨论。在当今的科研中，你能否辨认出维克多·弗兰肯斯坦那种科学野心的影子？关于不受约束的科技发展所发出的警告，在基因工程与人工智能时代依然振聋发聩。维多利亚时代的蜕变，舞台改编与社会评论，1823、1899。造物的首次复活并非发生在维克多的实验室里，而是在伦敦剧院的舞台上。1823年，理查德·布林斯利·皮克改编的《僭越》或弗兰肯斯坦的命运，将玛丽·雪莱复杂的哲学沉思转化为大众娱乐。 折射出维多利亚社会对阶级、劳工与社会动荡最深层的恐惧。想象一下1823年7月28日英国歌剧院的观众席 ，T.P. 库克饰演的造物沉默，而体格魁梧、踉跄地走过舞台。这是人工生命首次在戏剧中具象化。Far from being a simple adaptation, it was a radical reimagining that discarded much of Shelley's intricate philosophy, while heightening the social and political resonances that most unsettled and intrigued Victorian viewers. The stage versions of Frankenstein that appeared throughout the 1800s demonstrated how varying social environments could draw fresh interpretations from Shelley's source material. While Mary Shelley emphasized ethical duty and the perils of scientific overreach, Victorian reworkings turned the monster into an emblem of societal upheaval, industrial estrangement, and the threatening power of the masses when stirred by revolutionary beliefs. Accounts from the time of early Frankenstein performances, kept in periodicals and literary journals, record audience responses that extended well beyond mere amusement into authentic societal dread. In its critique of Peake's show, the London Literary Gazette observed that the monster's wordless rebuke to its maker bore implications that would have personally troubled every industrialist watching. The comparison between Victor forsaking his creation and how industrial capitalism treated its workforce was glaringly obvious. The shift of the monster from an articulate thinker to a silent brute mirrored Victorian unease, with Shelley's initial depiction of an artificial mind that outshone its maker in intellect. By stripping the monster of its ability for complex ethical thought, stage versions erased the provocative inquiries about fairness, acknowledgement, and societal duty that the book had presented. The monster was transformed into a sufferer instead of an ethical actor, deserving sympathy rather than posing a menace to established systems of knowledge. John Strachan, a professor at Bath Spa University, whose studies on Victorian performance culture shed light on how that era engaged with scientific topics, contends that theatrical versions functioned as testing grounds for grappling with societal fears that political dialogue was unable to tackle openly. Strachan notes that Victorian Frankenstein performances offered a secure environment for spectators to examine their anxieties regarding societal upheaval, technological advancement, and class strife. The monster's demise at the close of every show symbolically settled fears that actual politics could not dispel. The widespread appearance of Frankenstein versions during the Victorian era demonstrates the tale's ability to embrace vastly divergent ideological readings. Conservative performances depicted the monster as a caution against defying natural order. Meanwhile, progressive reworkings showed him as a casualty of societal unfairness, whose aggression stemmed from institutionalized persecution rather than any innate wickedness. Henry Milner's 1826 adaptation, Frankenstein, or The Man and the Monster, incorporated overt political motifs by placing parts of the narrative in the French Revolution. The version likens the monster's revolt against Victor to the public insurrection against aristocratic rule. This version was the first to read Frankenstein as a political parable, seeing Victor as a symbol of upper-class entitlement, and the monster as the embodiment of revolutionary energy that the indifference of the elite had turned into a destructive power. The Victorians' interest in mesmerism, spiritualism, and dubious scientific notions of consciousness offered fresh frameworks for interpreting the monster's awakening. Stage shows started weaving in current ideas about magnetic fluids, nerve energy, and the link between mind and substance. These concepts mirrored real scientific disputes regarding the very essence of life. These versions reshaped Frankenstein from a Gothic tale into early science fiction that earnestly considered materialist accounts of consciousness and selfhood. Most crucially, Victorian adaptations started investigating the monster's point of view in manners that Shelley's narrative framework had only partly accomplished. By showing events from the monster's perspective, stage plays compelled viewers to face the ethical intricacies of evaluating entities whose awareness and social conditions were radically unlike typical human existence. This breakthrough foreshadowed the psychological realism that would not take hold in literature for another generation. The era's most refined version, H.M. Milner's 1849. The man-monster brought up concepts that would not be thoroughly explored in Frankenstein academic study until the 1900s. This performance delved into the monster's connection to work, depicting him as both the ideal laborer with extraordinary strength and stamina and the greatest danger to worker unity because his synthetic existence positioned him beyond conventional social divisions. Diaries, letters, and newspaper reports from the Victorian era capture how audiences reacted to Frankenstein plays, showing the tale sparked deep philosophical thought beyond simple amusement. Many middle-class spectators saw unsettling similarities between how they treated household servants and how Victor cast aside his creature. Lower-income viewers felt a connection to the creature's loneliness and craving for acceptance, complicating straightforward class readings of the narrative. Advances in technology, gas lamps, mechanical stagecraft, and better makeup enabled shows to depict the monster's fabricated appearance with growing intricacy. Such technological innovations allowed deeper investigation into the line separating humans from machines, mirroring how Victorian culture wrestled with industrialization's effects on identity and social structure. According to Dr. Stephen Forey, author of the exhaustive work Hideous Progenies, which traces all Frankenstein adaptations, Victorian stage productions created interpretive frameworks that still shape how we read the story today. Forey explains that the Victorian period reshaped Frankenstein. It was no longer just a warning about one scientist's ambition, but became a wider reflection on social duty, technological progress, and what happens when sentient creatures are used merely as tools for human ends. What the era added most lastingly to Frankenstein's philosophical growth was the realization that the monster's awareness questioned the very foundations of law, ethics, and society. Victorian versions compelled viewers to grapple with issues of citizenship, personhood, and community membership that contemporary legal and political ideas couldn't fully resolve. These plays broke ground in debating the rights and duties of synthetic entities, debates that modern bioethicists and AI specialists still explore. Crucially, Victorian theatre showed that Shelley's novel held many possible interpretations that various social settings could unlock and expand. The monster's ability to represent revolutionary laborers, industrial estrangement, marginalized people, and fears about technology uncovered the tale's core design, a philosophical experiment that could hold vastly different ideas, yet keep its ability to unsettle and educate. By the close of the Victorian age, Frankenstein had grown from one book into a widespread cultural force, including many stage versions, countless literary spin-offs, and a deep body of critical analysis that acknowledged its power to shed light on the ethical twists of technological and societal transformation. No longer merely a character, the monster turned into a device for analyzing connections between making something and being accountable for it, between advancement and its aftermath, between personal drive and the common good. The way Victorians reworked Frankenstein set the pattern. Every subsequent era would find fresh philosophical layers in Shelley's original work, new fears to cast onto the creator-creation bond, and new lessons to draw from the sorrow of beings dwelling on the edges between human and alien, organic and synthetic, approved and detested. In your view, how do modern Frankenstein adaptations echo Victorian anxieties about class, work, and societal upheaval? Tell us if you think the monster's mistreatment still symbolizes social inequality today. The shift from German Expressionism to Hollywood horror on film, 1910, 1958. The monster's most impactful rebirth came not via lightning but through movie magic. German Expressionist directors realized Shelley's investigation of awareness, selfhood, and ethical duty could be put into images that affected viewers with extraordinary emotional and intellectual force. Imagine the shadowy cinemas of Weimar, Germany in 1920. There, crowds saw Paul Wegener's Der Golem, then grappled with Robert Wiene's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. These movies built the visual language for examining artificial consciousness and moral uncertainty, eventually leading to the most impactful Frankenstein film ever made. Film's ability to show the line dividing human from non-human, natural from man-made, made it perfect for tackling deep questions that stage plays could only hint at. With camera shots that implied the monster's viewpoint, lighting that stressed his isolation from ordinary society, and editing that broke normal time flow, directors could depict consciousness itself, something literature can describe but not display directly. James Whale's 1931 Frankenstein and its 1935 sequel Bride of Frankenstein did more than just translate Shelley's novel to film. They built a completely fresh philosophical structure for grasping the link between maker and made, a structure that has shaped all later conversations about artificial intelligence, technological duty, and what it means to be human. According to Dr. David Scal, author of the authoritative work The Monster Show that traces horror films' cultural influence, Whale's movies worked because they turned vague philosophical ideas into emotionally vivid images. Scal explains that Whale grasped the monster's sorrow went beyond one character. It was about existence itself. His movies let viewers sense the dread of living without social acceptance, of having awareness, but no group that would recognize or affirm that awareness. Boris Karloff's portrayal of the monster marked a breakthrough in how film depicted artificial consciousness philosophically, merging childlike purity with threatening physique, graceful movements with broken speech. Karloff fashioned a figure that captured the paradoxes of creatures who have human-like minds but no human social background. His monster was at once pitiable and frightening, smart yet scarred, harmless and hazardous. Jack Pierce's makeup design for Whale's monster turned abstract ideas about artificial life into something real and direct. The square-shaped skull hinted at surgical assembly, the heavy brow highlighted raw emotions, and the exposed neck bolts drew a line between being born naturally and being made mechanically. Through these visual choices, profound notions of consciousness, selfhood, and artificial existence were conveyed without the need for lengthy explanations or spoken words. Reviews from Whale's era, still kept in cinematic trade journals and scholarly periodicals, indicate that sophisticated viewers quickly grasped the philosophical depth embedded in his works. A review in the New York Times pointed out that Frankenstein prompts inquiries into the very essence of awareness and ethical accountability that go well past typical horror tropes. Literary scholars favorably juxtaposed these cinematic adaptations with Shelley's original novel, contending that the medium's visual storytelling amplified, rather than diluted, the narrative's underlying philosophical substance. From 1931 to 1958, an astounding number of Frankenstein retellings emerged, each investigating varied philosophical dimensions of man-made sentience. At the same time, they mirrored the era's dread of scientific progress, societal upheaval, and mechanized conflict. Every film unearthed fresh interpretations from Shelley's core idea, while speaking directly to the unique anxieties and hopes of its own time. The string of Universal Studios' Frankenstein follow-ups during the 1930s and 1940s cemented the monster as a persistent philosophical figure within mainstream pop culture. The 1939 film, Son of Frankenstein, delved into issues of inherited accountability and how moral duties are handed down across bloodlines. 3 years later, The Ghost of Frankenstein analyzed the transfer of identity and the intricate link between awareness and physical form. Released in 1943, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman examined whether a manufactured creature could establish social bonds with fellow societal rejects. However, the crown jewel of Universal's philosophical depth remains Bride of Frankenstein, which openly tackled themes of companionship, societal acknowledgement, and the entitlements of synthetic entities, issues Shelley had first suggested, but never completely unfurled. When the monster insisted on having a partner, viewers were compelled to grapple with the question: do beings arising from technological origins share the same core requirements and entitlements as organic humans? Wheeler Winston Dixon, a University of Nebraska professor whose authoritative research on vintage horror films is now standard reference, points out the bride's refusal of her intended mate ignited deep conversations about consent, desire, and communal inclusion issues that still engage philosophers and ethicists today. As Dixon explains, the bride's revulsion toward her designated partner mirrored societal unease about forced unions, but went further to probe whether a manufactured mind could ever develop genuine emotional bonds. After the war ended, fresh readings of the tale emerged, channeling Cold War fears concerning scientific investigation, state-backed experiments, and the weaponization of technical expertise. Movies such as I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, 1957, and Frankenstein, 1970, 1958, modernized Shelley's cautionary message about unrestrained scientific aspiration These works tapped into the period's dread of atomic energy studies, cosmic ventures, and germ-based conflict. Subsequent retellings inserted clearly political overtones by recasting Victor as a scientist working for the state, his experiments driven by martial objectives rather than altruistic aims. The monster transformed into a potent emblem of the unforeseen fallout from arms development, ecological ruin, and technological progress, carried forward with little moral reflection. The most groundbreaking version of that epoch came from Terence Fisher's 1957 The Curse of Frankenstein, produced by Hammer Films. This film flipped the philosophical center of gravity by putting Victor, not his creation, under the harsh spotlight of ethical scrutiny. Peter Cushing's chilling performance depicted Frankenstein as a purely logical scientist, seeing sentience as a mechanical puzzle rather than an ethical duty. A perfect mirror of the period's fear that technology was stripping away our humanity. Fisher's take shifted the narrative from a simple warning against one man's arrogance to a sweeping condemnation of scientific materialism, a worldview that treats living creatures as nothing more than automata. The film posed unsettling queries. Can consciousness truly be comprehended through reductionist techniques alone? And do technological interventions for human improvement inevitably trample upon the core elements of identity and self-worth? The shifting appearance of the monster across the cinematic era mirrored evolving perceptions of awareness, self-concept, and synthetic existence. Initial depictions stressed its mechanical assembly and animated by technology, but subsequent films probed more nuanced issues: the link between mind and physique, the interplay of personal and communal identity, and the boundary between natural growth and artificial crafting. Parallel breakthroughs in science, such as computing, space travel, nuclear investigation, and the dawn of cybernetics offered novel frameworks for interpreting both the monster's sentience and Victor's driving impulses. Directors started weaving in allusions to electronic minds, machine intelligence, and numerical processing, all echoing real-world conjectures about the feasibility of manufacturing conscious devices. That epic shaped the visual and conceptual norms that still guide today's depictions of fabricated awareness across sci-fi, horror, and philosophical inquiries. The monster's solitude, yearning to be accepted by society, his potential for both brutality and gentleness, and his multifaceted bond with his maker set a pattern for investigating the ethical and existential riddles that any variety of engineered intelligence must face. Crucially, film versions prove that Frankenstein's philosophical substance could be faithfully carried into other forms of expression without losing its capacity to both unsettle and illuminate. The monster's tragic essence stayed unmistakable, whether conveyed via Karloff's expressive movements, Cushing's cold precision, or the many visual symbols that filmmakers use to explore awareness, selfhood, and ethical duty. Come 1958, the screen had elevated Frankenstein beyond mere horror. It now stood as a philosophical paradigm for scrutinizing how humankind interacts with its own inventions, a lens for spotting moral gaps in scientific practice, and an ominous foreshadowing of the ethical dilemmas that artificial awareness would eventually bring to civilization. Which film version of the monster strikes you as the most philosophically powerful? Tell us how cinematic storytelling either amplifies or alters the philosophical depth of Shelley's original novel. This leads into the era of literary renaissance, postmodern critiques, and feminist reinterpretations, spanning 1965 through 2000. The monster's deepest intellectual rebirth happened not inside labs or on movie sets, but rather in college discussion circles and feminist awareness gatherings of the 1960s. There, academics and authors uncovered that Mary Shelley's apparently simple story of scientific overreach actually teemed with hidden messages concerning sex, authority, and social artifice layers that prior readings had merely scratched. Imagine the scholarly symposiums in the late 1960s, where critics, such as Ellen Mowers, initially proposed that Frankenstein ought to be interpreted as a birth allegory, one that mirrors women's intricate connections to maternity, creativity, and social validation. This approach was no mere layering of feminist themes onto older interpretations. A major shift occurred in comprehending the book's philosophical underpinnings once it was acknowledged that issues of creation, awareness, and ethical duty had always been profoundly influenced by gender. The surge in Frankenstein studies, starting in the 1970s, uncovered that Mary Shelley's youthful mind had woven philosophical intricacies into her narrative that even astute readers from the 1800s and early 1900s had overlooked. Feminist analysts, postmodern thinkers, and post-colonial academics found that the creature's predicament, an artificially made entity, denied social acceptance, offered a compelling analogy for grasping the lives of women, ethnic minorities, and colonized populations, groups that had been deliberately shut out from fully engaging in society and politics. The pioneering study by Dr. Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar in their 1979 work, The Mad Woman in the Attic, transformed the interpretation of Frankenstein by showing that the story's investigation into creation and consciousness could not be separated from its scrutiny of gender dynamics and authority in society. In a 1985 interview, Gilbert described how Mary Shelley crafted a tale of masculine scientific drive. Yet the monster's ordeal of being spurned and isolated mirrored exactly the way women were barred from intellectual pursuits, societal acknowledgement, and political involvement. This feminist perspective shifted the view of Victor Frankenstein from a tragic hero whose lofty aspirations resulted in dreadful outcomes to a far more intricate character. His scientific endeavors now appeared to embody distinctly masculine attitudes toward knowledge and authority, deliberately sidelining feminine viewpoints on creation, care, and ethical accountability. The creature being cast aside turned into a symbol of how patriarchal culture deals with anything falling outside accepted norms of existence. Modern literary retelling started delving into these newly acknowledged philosophical layers by directly challenging the gender-based preconceptions that had long defined traditional readings of Frankenstein. In Angela Carter's 1974 tale, The Loves of Lady Purple, the monster is recast as a synthetic female entity. Her consciousness grows as she encounters romantic writings, and the story investigates how gender influences both the act of creation and society's reactions to an artificial mind. Brian Aldiss's 1973 novel, Frankenstein Unbound, the era's most impactful literary adaptation, wove an intricate time structure. It brought Mary Shelley face to face with her own fictional creations, enabling a self-reflective inquiry into the bond between an author's act of creation and a character's awareness. This mirrored the original book's themes while layering fresh significance onto literary creation as a kind of synthetic life generation. Thinkers like Jacques Derrida and Julia Kristeva found Frankenstein to be a perfect example for analyzing how identity, awareness, and societal acceptance are constructed. The creature had self-awareness but no social approval, which vividly demonstrated theoretical ideas about what it means to have an identity and be recognized by others. Such concepts had been debated by philosophers in the abstract. Professor Meller contends that postmodern interpretations uncovered philosophical meanings that remained invisible to those readers bound by specific cultural biases. These biases blocked the acknowledgement of other viewpoints regarding awareness, identity, and social inclusion. Meller points out that the creature's reasoning predates modern theories. These concepts about how society constructs reality were not completely grasped until feminist and post-colonial analysis emerged. Mary Shelley's personal diaries showed that she was deeply involved with the works of thinkers such as Locke, Hume, and Godwin. Their doctrines on consciousness and personal identity had a direct impact on Frankenstein. This evidence elevated the novel to a nuanced participant in the intellectual dialogues of the Enlightenment. Post-colonial readings viewed the creature's repudiation as an allegory for colonial power dynamics. Shelley's narrative embedded notions of otherness and social inclusion that mirrored contemporary discussions around slavery and racial rank during her lifetime. The monster's pleas for fairness resonated with abolitionist language. The major breakthrough of that era was appreciating the book's philosophical depth. Feminist and post-colonial analyses laid bare fundamental issues concerning gender and authority. These topics remained hidden solely because of the cultural biases held by readers. Successive literary adaptations demonstrate that every generation uncovers fresh philosophical insights. The monster's awareness turned into a lens for scrutinizing society's own oversights. By the turn of the millennium, Frankenstein had become a paradigm for discussing creation, identity, and accountability. The creature came to symbolize a philosophical stance regarding synthetic consciousness, shedding light on the ethical dilemmas posed by any kind of societal alienation. What social justice movements are reflected in these analyses? Consider how the monster's ostracism echoes the experiences of today's marginalized groups. In modern times, the creature is reborn through advances in biotechnology and artificial intelligence research. Scientists today wrestle with artificial intelligence, genetic manipulation, and digital awareness. Mary Shelley's cautions about manufacturing synthetic life have never been more pertinent. Tools like CRISPR and neural network systems provoke deep inquiries into the nature of consciousness. Frankenstein has transformed from a mere curiosity into a prophecy for ethical considerations in technology. The proliferation of reinterpretations after the year 2000 underscores a yearning for philosophical orientation. Modern creations dig into fresh ramifications concerning awareness and moral liability. Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go delves into the lives of clones who possess complete self-awareness, yet originate from artificial means. Like Mary Shelley's monster, these clones are denied societal acceptance. Dr. Johnston contends that the book highlights moral dilemmas inherent in genetic engineering. Cloned entities compel us to confront the ethical standing of synthetic life forms. Ishiguro probes the link between genetic lineage and moral value. The Frankenstein paradigm is repurposed by science fiction to portray AIs that surpass human intellect. Alex Garland's Ex Machina reimagines the dynamic between maker and made within the context of artificial intelligence evaluation. Vast language models ignite discussions on whether machines can possess awareness. Margaret Atwood's Mad Adam saga delves into genetic manipulation and the emergence of novel conscious entities. The altered creatures in Atwood's work challenge our notions of species, identity, and ethical treatment. The series mirrors ecological dread by employing Mary Shelley's narrative blueprint. Interference with nature through technology either transgresses fundamental rules or could be a legitimate answer to planetary catastrophe. In Atwood's narrative, characters confront dilemmas regarding genetic alteration, mirroring Victor's own choices about fabricating life, yet within scenarios where these changes could prove essential for the continuation of their kind. Modern bioethics has deliberately adopted the story of Frankenstein as a lens to scrutinize ethical dilemmas stemming from genetic engineering, synthetic biology, and assisted reproductive technologies. In numerous reports concerning cloning, genetic manipulation, and artificial procreation, the President's Council on Bioethics cited Shelley's novel, acknowledging that her philosophical contributions on creation, awareness, and moral duty still inform today's policy discussions. Arthur Kaplan, a professor at NYU's Division of Medical Ethics, observes that Frankenstein offers a more nuanced guide to current bioethical problems than many purely theoretical methods, since Shelley's structure weaves together issues of personal awareness with larger questions of societal obligation and the prudence of technical innovation. According to Kaplan, the creature's ordeal sheds light on the moral dilemmas that surface whenever emerging technologies produce entities with ambiguous ethical standing. Shelley's work compels us to scrutinize our preconceptions about awareness, identity, and community inclusion, something that bare theoretical systems are unable to accomplish. Progress in sophisticated robotics has led to concrete implementations of Frankenstein's philosophical ideas, addressing queries about synthetic entities that function within human societal settings. Studies in social robotics, companion bots, and autonomous machines more and more invoke Shelley's examination of awareness, acknowledgement, and ethical duty as these technologies inch toward capacities that muddy the line between mere instruments and sentient actors. Today's horror literature has moved past classic creature tales, instead using Shelley's motifs to examine digital awareness, transferred consciousness, and simulated entities, beings whose presence provokes inquiries regarding physical form, genuineness, and societal acceptance. Programs such as the Black Mirror episodes San Junipero and USS Callister probe whether a digital mind is entitled to the same ethical treatment as a biological one, applying Shelley's philosophical lens to investigate issues of selfhood, persistence, and community membership in digital worlds. The rise of social platforms and online personas has provided fresh perspectives for comprehending the monster's yearning for acceptance and community connection. Modern retellings examine how synthetic creatures could pursue affirmation via internet groups, cyber relationships, and simulated social webs, avenues that offer substitutes for conventional acceptance, but also spark doubts about realness, deceit, and true bonding. Novels that imagine Mary Shelley's own life have multiplied, mirroring the acknowledgement that her meditations on awareness, genesis, and ethical duty foreshadowed current disputes with astounding exactness. Books such as Jess Walter's Beautiful Ruins and Miranda Seymour's Mary Shelley delve into the story of how a teenager crafted intellectual structures that still speak to advanced investigations in AI, bioethics, and the science of consciousness. Current retellings place growing weight on the societal and political aspects of the monster's ostracism, acknowledging that issues surrounding synthetic awareness touch upon living discussions about fairness, acknowledgement, and belonging. The monster's ordeal becomes a parable for grasping how communities react to any kind of awareness or selfhood that defies conventional boundaries of permissible being. The freshest modern encounters with Shelley's ideas manifest in interactive formats and video games, where users can decide whether to build, foster, or spurn synthetic awareness. In games such as Detroit, Become Human, players are placed in scenarios that directly mirror the ethical conflicts faced by Victor Frankenstein, as they examine how personal decisions concerning the acknowledgement or rejection of artificial consciousness could escalate into social and political ramifications. By immersing audiences in the decision-making procedures that forge ethical bonds between creators and sentient entities, these interactive encounters expose fresh layers within Shelley's philosophical structure. Gamers are compelled to confront issues regarding awareness, acknowledgement, and accountability as they encounter outcomes that reach past personal connections to include wider societal and political repercussions. Arguably, the most important shift is that modern reinterpretations of Frankenstein now delve into the monster's viewpoint via digital platforms, which are able to depict artificial consciousness in a more immediate manner than earlier media. Virtual reality, AI-driven stories, and interactive storytelling enable novel ways of empathizing and comprehending, moving toward the philosophical notion of truly experiencing a form of consciousness that functions by rules distinct from human perception. The being's transformation in today's culture mirrors the acknowledgement that Mary Shelley's profound understanding of sentience, genesis, and ethical duty offers crucial structures for steering through technological progress, which renders her imagined situations ever more plausible instead of merely fantasy. As artificial intelligence shifts from speculative fiction to a tangible research problem, Frankenstein has evolved into more than mere amusement. It now serves as vital groundwork for the ethical intricacies humanity must inevitably confront. In your view, which present-day innovations most desperately need the ethical structure that Mary Shelley crafted within her Frankenstein narrative? We invite you to reflect on how her intellectual perspectives could steer the conscientious advancement of AI, genetic modification, and other nascent fields. The eternal Prometheus, the enduring philosophical impact of Frankenstein. Thus, our exploration of the intellectual workshop where Frankenstein's literary transformation occurred draws to a close, yet the monster's impact persists, expanding across all domains that wrestle with awareness, genesis, and ethical obligation, demonstrating that Mary Shelley's youthful creativity spawned far more than a mere tale. She established a lasting paradigm for comprehending humanity's connection to its own technological prowess. Ranging from the groundbreaking philosophical integration seen in the 1818 edition to modern interactions with AI and genetic engineering, Frankenstein has exhibited an extraordinary ability to absorb fresh interpretations while retaining its fundamental strength to unsettle, illuminate, and reshape our conception of the real price of creation. Every era unearths fresh terrors and novel insights within the narrative of the scientist who bravely forged awareness and the being who insisted on acknowledgement from a society that lacked any classification for his being. The factor that sets Frankenstein apart from other significant literary pieces is its singular role as both an artistic accomplishment and a philosophical conceptual test. The monster in Shelley's tale functions concurrently as a persona, an emblem, and an investigative instrument, supplying structures for scrutinizing ethical intricacies that wholly theoretical philosophical methods fail to fully tackle. The lasting pertinence of the story springs from its effective fusion of emotional involvement with scholarly strictness, compelling readers to experience the ramifications of philosophical stances instead of only grasping them intellectually. The philosophical essence of the monster has inserted itself into fields Mary Shelley could never have foreseen, shaping robotics, studies, bioethics, regulations, AI advancement, and environmental research. By raising queries about sentience, accountability, and technological discernment queries that become increasingly pressing as our abilities near the divine-like authority Victor Frankenstein once held in the fictional realm. Modern scientists engaged in artificial sentience directly invoke the story of Frankenstein as they deliberate the moral duties that inventors are burdened with toward the conscious entities they generate. The tale supplies terminology and conceptual schemes for investigating ethical issues that purely technical procedures are incapable of resolving. What qualifies as sufficient groundwork for bringing sentient beings into existence? What obligations should creators assume regarding the societal incorporation of artificial awareness? In what ways might human communities identify and make space for conscious entities that function under rules unlike those of human perception? Those who study bioethics, while wrestling with matters like genetic modification, cloning, and synthetic life forms, have found that Mary Shelley's deep examination of creation, awareness, and ethical duty offers a level of insight surpassing much of today's moral philosophy. This is because her conceptual structure foresees the intricate psychological and societal difficulties that arise when our technical powers outpace the language we have for discussing right and wrong. The monster's plea to be acknowledged mirrors how nature seems to react to human intervention through shifting climates, disappearing species, and collapsing ecosystems, thereby shaking the cozy belief that humanity reigns supreme over the natural world. What is perhaps most striking is that the philosophical outline in Frankenstein turned out to be a foreshadowing of the mental and communal struggles that machine sentience will certainly present to human civilization. The being's encounter with loneliness, his longing to be accepted by society, his tangled bond with the one who made him, and his ability to both invent and annihilate all foreshadow moral quandaries that scientists are just starting to face now that AI is nearing the sophistication of the human mind. The enduring philosophical gift of this tale is its acknowledgement that any form of awareness, be it organic or synthetic, generates ethical duties that go well beyond personal connections and touch on wider matters of societal acceptance, fairness, and the weight that accompanies the act of creation. Mary Shelley's structure compels us to think about viewpoints that could otherwise stay hidden, guaranteeing that discussions regarding synthetic sentience bring in viewpoints speaking for the experiences of the created rather than just the creators themselves. Dr. Susan Schneider from the Center for the Future Mind contends that the relevance of Frankenstein will only grow. As AI edges toward sentience, it is because Shelley's philosophical system tackles the mental and communal aspects that purely technical methods consistently ignore. Schneider explains that the monster's insistence on being acknowledged pushes us to ask if mere awareness instantly grants entitlements to social inclusion and ethical respect. Such questions will transform from theoretical to pressing as AI systems start exhibiting functions that hint at a conscious inner life. The being's philosophical inheritance reaches further than particular uses, covering wider shifts in the way human collectives grasp awareness, selfhood, and ethical accountability. Frankenstein has shown that issues of what it means to be a person, how to gain acknowledgement, and where one belongs socially cannot be solved solely by technological or legal means. What is needed is the compassionate vision that storytelling offers, paired with strict philosophical reasoning that can steer real-world choices. Modern reinterpretations keep uncovering fresh philosophical meanings in Shelley's original structure, while responding to fears that mirror our current technological age. A sentience that is purely digital and lacks a corporeal form, genes altered so much that species lines become indistinct, and AI that outpaces human intellect in certain areas, yet fails to grasp wider social and ethical settings. The deepest insight from the philosophical journey of Frankenstein is that awareness, no matter where it comes from, brings about ethical duties that if societies disregard, they do so at great risk. The monster's aggressive actions stem not from any inborn wickedness, but from a pattern of societal exclusion that rejects his core craving for acceptance and community. This understanding offers critical direction for any civilization required to blend fresh types of awareness into its current social and political frameworks. Regardless of whether we consider AI, gene editing, repairing nature, or campaigns for social equity, the philosophical structure of Frankenstein warns us that sentience puts demands on reality that cannot be ignored just because they come from places we hadn't predicted or that we don't completely comprehend. The being's powerful reasoning regarding fairness, acknowledgement, and ethical concern lays down rules that go beyond the particular situation of his fictitious life. In today's world, where technological progress frequently moves ahead without sufficient reflection on its moral consequences, Frankenstein acts as vital readiness for the ethical struggles our kind will surely encounter. This narrative offers not only cautions against unrestrained scientific drive, but also constructive advice on the duties that accompany the power to create, and the necessity of preserving wisdom hand in hand with technical skill. Because the monster remains forever etched in the human psyche, coming generations will keep unveiling novel philosophical layers within Shelley's seminal work, new fears to cast upon the bond between maker and made, and fresh insights to draw from the sorrow of entities that dwell on the threshold separating human from alien, natural from synthetic, conventional from revolutionary. Starting at the foggy banks of Lake Geneva, where Mary Shelley originally conceived a being brought to life by scientific drive, and continuing to the data centers and labs today where modern researchers wrestle with matters of sentience and creation, Frankenstein continues to be our indispensable handbook for navigating the ethical intricacies of technological progress and the obligations that arise from possessing the ability to birth-aware life. This tale serves as a reminder that every creative deed, be it in art, science, or technology, creates duties that stretch well past personal aims and touch upon larger issues of societal accountability, ethical regard, and the type of reality we wish to constitute. Our decisions regarding what we bring into existence and the way we care for those creations shape our path. Within Mary Shelley's philosophical workshop, her imagination still yields fresh perspectives on consciousness, creation, and ethics. The creature acts as a cautionary figure and a mentor, reminding us that our loftiest ambitions demand profound wisdom to realize their potential, lest we trigger outcomes beyond our ability to manage or grasp. Every debate about artificial consciousness, genetic manipulation, and technological accountability reverberates with the creature's tread, guaranteeing that coming generations of creators will grapple with the same core dilemmas that haunted Victor Frankenstein. What duties do we hold towards sentient entities we have summoned into being? What measures can we take so that our inventive force fuels wisdom instead of naked ambition? Through our decisions regarding consciousness, technology, and ethical accountability, what world are we striving to build? Across laboratory surfaces where scientists tinker with the very foundations of life, inside data centers where synthetic intellects handle data with ever greater refinement, and throughout the minds of creators still probing the bond between maker and made, the philosophical inheritance of Frankenstein persists unyielding like rock and persistent like guilt. The monster's plea for acknowledgement highlights the inherent worth of sentience in any form. It reminds us that consciousness, be it organic or engineered, imposes ethical demands on reality that go beyond the conditions of its birth. Mary Shelley's lasting present to human insight offers more than mere amusement. It serves as crucial groundwork for the ethical trials ahead, for any civilization daring to emulate divine creativity while still possessing the prudence to harness that might with care. In your view, how ought Mary Shelley's philosophical reflections on sentience, creation, and moral duty steer modern investigations into artificial intelligence, genetic modification, or similar developing fields? Tell us your opinions. Have we absorbed the teachings that Frankenstein intended to impart? Or do we stay just as exposed to the perils of unrestrained scientific drive as Victor Frankenstein was? Thus, cherished voyagers along darkened trails, our story reaches its present end. Yet bear in mind, the night stretches on, and ancient legends never fully slumber. Should these murmurs of lost terrors and timeless marvels have awakened an unquiet spirit inside you, let it not dwindle. Please subscribe to this modest channel so that the shadow may seek you out once more, and activate the bell so no nocturnal narrative slips past your hearing. Recount your own ghostly experiences in the comments beneath, because every account merits preservation. Until our next rendezvous in the silence that lingers between realms, pleasant slumbers, beloved audience.